Hello and welcome to Arise News and our international business review of the year. I am Bosun Omofaye. Throughout the next 30 minutes, we'll bring you up to date on an extraordinary year in the global economy. Plus, Arise correspondent Adefemi Akinsanya will be joining us from our London studio, and she's with our very own business analyst, Michael Wilson, will be providing his insights a bit later in the program. Now, coming up in the show, neither long, uneven, or uncertain, the economic recovery that no one saw coming. A vaccine boost for the world stock market, but could new COVID strains halt the rally? And the return of the dreaded I word, inflation, is back with us. But for how long? But first, let's look back at the economic recovery of 2021, an astonishing rebound that quickly went from despair to exuberance. Arise News correspondent Laurie Laird has the story.
The ascent out of this calamitous great lockdown is likely to be long, uneven, and highly uncertain.
That's Geeta Gopinath, chief executive at the International Monetary Fund, speaking in October of 2020, warning darkly of potential long-term damage to global finances resulting from the COVID pandemic. And here's a decidedly more optimistic Ms. Gopinath a year later.
We have a slight downward revision for global growth for this year to 5.9%. For next year, our projection remains unchanged at 4.9%. The divergences in growth prospects across countries, however, persists and remains a major concern.
Yes, the IMF did downgrade its forecast slightly to 5.9% this year, but that's well above the 3.4% pace predicted just a few months earlier. That's the strongest global growth in nearly half a century, more than erasing the 3.1% COVID-induced contraction of 2020. How did the global economy recover so quickly and so robustly? In the words of Bank of England Governor Andrew Bailey, go big and go fast. The unfortunate Mr. Bailey took up his role in March of 2020, just days after COVID was declared a global pandemic, inflicting paralysis on financial markets. Translating Bailey's language into layman's terms, monetary authorities threw money at the problem. Central banks across the world, including at the U.S. Federal Reserve, used newly printed money to buy financial assets, particularly government bonds. That kept the financial markets afloat, ensuring that banks and companies had access to cash. Most developed nations followed suit, providing incomes to those left without jobs when COVID forced the closure of entire service sectors. Some countries implemented even more dramatic measures. Under former President Donald Trump, the U.S. government sent hefty checks to almost all Americans.
Thank you all very much. It's a very important day. I'll sign the single biggest economic relief package in American history, and I must say, or any other package, by the way.
His successor and bitter political opponent promised more spending even before taking office and pushed another support bill through a deeply divided Congress just months later. The result, a consumer boon across the developed world, with homebound workers splashing out on furniture, electronics, toys, games, anything to relieve the tedium of lockdown. Later in the year, as quarantines lifted, bars and restaurants reopened, and newly liberated revelers gave a boost to the battered service sector, partying like it was 2019. But after the party comes the hangover. By year-end, rising energy prices had lifted long-banished inflation to its highest level in decades. And that leaves Mr. Powell and his international central bank colleagues with a desperate decision. Should interest rates rise, even as a new wave of COVID infections threatens to derail the recovery?
And as economies recovered, so did financial markets. Stocks, commodities, even cryptocurrencies held multi-year highs in 2021, thanks to support from central banks and governments. But unlike the financial crisis of 2008, it wasn't just professional investors who benefited from the rally. Furloughed workers trading from the comfort of their sofas also shared in the windfall. Arise News anchor Rosa Soderi has more.
Robinhood Financial, LLC, member FINRA/SIPC.
This is Nick. This is Jack. And this is Robinhood Snacks. We got digestible financial news.
And this is the world of financial market trading in 2021. No longer the preserve of professionals, like the dealers on the floor of the New York Stock Exchange, this year, grassroots investors, many at home courtesy of job retention schemes, piled into the markets. They're using commission-free apps and swapping tips through social media via mobile telephones. These do-it-yourself investors accounted for almost a quarter of all activity in early 2021, up from just 10% in 2019. And while lawmakers on Capitol Hill held hearings on the risks of independent internet trading, many retail investors joined their professional brethren in making a not-so-quiet killing in a market that refused to succumb to COVID, displaying vibrancy and vitality through most of the year. A global stock market index compiled by MSCI, which includes shares in developed markets including Japan, was up by 16% towards the end of the year. But it was technology stocks in the United States that did most of the heavy lifting. Shares in iconic device maker Apple rose by close to 40%, while Microsoft surged by more than 50%. But it was controversial electric car maker Tesla that contributed the most to the market's acceleration. The New York-listed shares more than doubled over the course of the year, giving the only recently profitable company a market value of more than $1 trillion, making founder Elon Musk one of the world's richest men and providing the capital for his SpaceX rocket program.
Go NASA, go SpaceX.
And it was Musk himself who lit a fire under one of the other hot investing trends of 2021, the resurgence of Bitcoin. Musk announced a large investment in the cryptocurrency and offering to accept payment in the digital asset, although that was a decision he quickly reversed. While central bankers have warned of the risks of investing in Bitcoin, many analysts also raise questions over the staying power of that tech stock rally in the United States.
There's tremendous amount of froth in the market. There's lots of pockets that need to come, back to reality. And right now, foreign investors, though, when you take a look at their situation, U.S. stocks still look very attractive, and that's why you still see any dip is immediately being bought. So that's why we're it seems like we're making a fresh record high, going up 0.1 of a percentage point, on a regular basis.
The once red-hot Facebook rose by just 18% this year, underperforming the broader market, amid accusations that the social media giant has done little to root out harmful content. Chief Executive Mark Zuckerberg is no stranger to Capitol Hill. He's been hauled to Congress on numerous occasions to explain the company's strategies. But the testimony of a former Facebook employee has set lawmakers on the warpath. Many now speak openly of breaking the company up.
Mark holds a very unique role in the tech industry in that he holds over 55% of all the voting shares for Facebook. There are no similarly powerful companies that are as unilaterally controlled. And in the end, the buck stops with Mark. There is no one currently holding Mark accountable but himself.
Microsoft has also been exposed to the glare of competition authorities, and President Brad Smith appeared to concede to lawmaker demands in congressional testimony earlier this year. Amazon and Google have also been accused of monopolistic behavior, raising fears that these tech cash cows could become more highly regulated. And that could bring the amazing tech rally to an end in 2022.
Our Arise correspondent Adefemi Akisanya now joins us from London.
Thank you very much, Boston. Well, with me in the studio is Arise business analyst Michael Wilson. Mike, it's definitely been quite a year for tech stocks. Tesla, if we start there, is there anything stopping this year?
Yeah, I think there is. I mean, it has had an extraordinary year. There's no question about that. The problem is actually delivering the vehicles to the customers. Elon Musk has already said that he's slightly worried about that, or at least has implied it in his Twitter comments and so on. And that really is the problem. And that many people have actually ordered these cars and they haven't arrived. And so they've had to take taxis, or they've had to have hire cars and so on. And that's not really where you want to be. So he's acknowledged that himself. The real problem is when the electrical infrastructure infrastructure in various countries is going to be ready, whether or not it's going to be ready, to actually power these cars, and when batteries are going to be small enough but strong enough to take the distance right up to where you want it to be.
So a whole lot of demand there, outstripping supply. And if we look at Facebook, another example of a whole lot of growth happening within this 1 year. If we look at that growth, some would say it's kind of grown past regulation. How can regulation keep up with Facebook?
Regulation can keep up with it very easily. There's no question about that. It's coming under pressure in Europe. It's coming under pressure in the United States. It's coming under pressure in Africa, and it will come under pressure in the United Kingdom as well. It's getting too big. There's no question about that. Now, where does it want to go? It started off as a little social media company. It's not like that now. It's part of people's lives, and it's taking on news services, and it's taking on influencing, and it's also getting a lot of criticism from parents, for example, whose children are looking at it and getting perhaps even fake news from it. So it's getting into big, difficult waters. I think it'll be broken up. It'll be one of these big companies that just like Standard Oil in the United States in the 1930s.
Understood. If we look at this rally and how much it's gone on, how much further do you think it could go, especially as interest rates are likely to rise?
First of all, I don't think interest rates are going to have a great... They won't rise a great deal. They will rise. There's no question about that. As far as equities are concerned, there's still plenty of money on the sidelines, plenty of people looking at equities as a source of income from dividends as well as the capital value of the companies as well. And it's happening everywhere. The stock markets are drawing ahead of what's going on in the real economies, and that will continue because there's lots of money around looking for a place to go.
So then, Michael, how dependent would you say then are global equity markets on developments happening in the United States?
Well, as far as the United States is concerned, what I would be looking at there is the enormous infrastructure program that President Biden is getting through. It's happening very, very slowly because there's not a huge majority in the House for what he actually wants to do. But it is happening, and it's happening very gently. So it's going to be more people back at work. It's going to be more building materials, more steel, more wood, more lumber, as they call it in the United States. All these kind of things are entirely dependent on that program actually going through. It's rebuilding America. That's what he's trying to do. Whether he gets there, that's a different question, but that certainly will help equity markets in 2022.
Well, thank you very much, Michael. Bosun, it's over to you.
Stay with us because just ahead, we'll be getting predictions for the new year. Plus, inflation is back. Could the developed world be facing a return to the bad old days of the 1970s? There's a lot more to come after this short break. You're watching a special Arise Business program, looking back at the exceptional year of 2021 and the potential pitfalls ahead in 2022. Before that, we're focusing on China and its often tense relationship with Western economies. Amid accusations that it's playing fast and loose with global trading rules, there's been talk of decoupling from the world's second biggest economy. But can China live without the West? And can the West live without China? That was January of 2002, when China joined the World Trade Organization. Delegates toasted the newest member of the club amid hopes that an enormous but still developing China might mature into a modern economy operating under global trading rules. While WTO membership allowed the Middle Kingdom to become the workshop of the world, exporting goods across the globe, there were many who believe that China has exploited WTO rules.
But we can't allow China to rip us off anymore as a country. We can't allow China to take $500 billion a year out of our country. We can't do that.
Despite multiple meetings with Chinese leadership, Trump rarely missed an opportunity to condemn the emerging economy. And anyone hoping for a more cuddly approach from the Biden administration could be sorely disappointed. A top cabinet member lamented China's outperformance on many economic metrics.
In recent decades, our public investment as a share of the economy has fallen more than 40%. We're still relying heavily on those earlier achievements, schools, roads, and innovations created a long time ago. Meanwhile, other countries have doubled down. For example, China is spending 3 times as much on infrastructure as we do every year.
And the leader of the Senate pledged urgent action.
I directed the chairs and members of our relevant committees to start drafting a legislative package to outcompete China and create new American jobs.
America isn't alone in its concern over China's economic might. Witness European fretting over the dominance of telecoms giant Huawei.
We definitely have to deal with the fact that China, for example, is pursuing a quite successful infrastructure policy to some extent, and we cannot just stand by and watch.
And that spawned a few of the economic buzzwords of 2021: decoupling, reshoring, in other words, reducing dependence on the Chinese economy. America has had some early success. Here is the governor of Texas announcing the opening of a semiconductor plant in his state, an attempt to diversify away from Chinese suppliers.
The implications of this facility extend far beyond the boundaries of Texas. It's going to impact the entire world. As you all know, we face a global shortage of semiconductor chips. And I want you to know that Texas is working with Samsung to provide long-term solutions for the world's growing chip shortage. Investments of this magnitude, they don't just happen overnight. They are the result of hard work that is put in at the federal level, at the state level, and at the local level.
But with the Chinese economy so integrated with the West, witness the foreign cars on offer at the Jiangsu Auto Show. Decoupling may be easier said than done, particularly with China appearing a bit more amenable toward the United States.
It's really, to send a huge positive signals and message around world for the high-level summit. So what I would hope that this summit will do, and also for the next 12 months or even longer can happen, is that certainly we'll see a turning point. We'll see, the continuous deterioration and downward spiral be kept at a certain level now.
But China may have economic woes of its own after its biggest property developer, Evergrande, failed to repay its lenders toward the end of the year. The company was forced to bring in police guards to deter protesters. But Evergrande may be too big to fail. Most analysts see the government coming to the rescue, either directly or indirectly.
I think the government is very close to a resolution over the Evergrande problem because it cannot drag on forever. It will hurt everybody involved.
And despite Evergrande's woes, many American companies are salivating at the prospect of reaching China's vast and growing middle class. Earlier this month, JP Morgan boss Jamie Dimon was forced to apologize to the Chinese government after saying that his bank would outlast the Communist Party. And the unusual humility from Mr. Dimon, perhaps America's best-known banker, shows that in the case of China and the West, commercial interest may trump the notion of decoupling. Yeah, we go over to London one last time and join Femi Akinsanya.
Thank you, Bosun. Well, I'm still joined by Arise business analyst Michael Wilson. Michael, if we look at inflation, many central bankers have called it transitory. What does that mean, and do you think they're right?
I think they did call it transitory for all the right reasons. I mean, they were looking at economies coming out of the depths of the pandemic and rapidly building up again. And of course, that pushed prices right up. Question was, how long is that going to last? I think now, we saw this in the United States right at the end of 2021, that these inflationary pressures are slightly longer lasting than that. And it's a question of what do central bankers actually do? Here's what the dilemma is. So you've got economies which are weak. Now, normally you wouldn't raise interest rates at that time, but you want to control inflation. So that's what you've got to do. It's going to be a very, very difficult path for central banks to actually navigate right through 2022.
Both the Bank of England and the Federal Reserve have both been hinting of a near-term rate hike. How do you think this will affect global markets?
I think that what they will see, I mean, both these banks, people normally look at central banks and say, what kind of signals are they trying to give us? It's been very, very difficult to read both those banks, both the Bank of England and the Fed. I think that equity markets will continue because there's a lot of money looking for returns. Interest rates generally on savings are so low that they're not going to get money there. They wouldn't be thinking about government bonds. So I feel as though the equity markets will think at last the central banks are going to do something. They won't raise rates by a huge amount, but it'll show that they've got an idea about inflation, and that will in the end help equity markets.
Mikey, let's touch on inflation very quickly. Is it here to stay? Do you think we can see a return to the bad old days of the 1970s?
No, definitely not. No, it won't be as bad as that, because I don't think people had any idea what was going on. I mean, those were really, really bad days, not just bad days. They were really bad days. No, I don't see a return to that kind of thing at all. I think that what will happen is that central banks will keep a sort of lid on it, and they'll do what they can, but certainly there'll be no return to interest rates at 12 or 15%. That just simply is not going to happen.
Understood. Finally, Mikey, give us your highlight of 2021 and give us your outlook for 2022.
Highlight of 2021 was the strength of the equity markets. A sort of semi-joke highlight was the fact that Turkey appeared to be the one country with rising inflation that was actually lowering interest rates. Now, I don't know how that works. I just have no idea, but apparently that's what they want to do. They think it's going to attract more industry into the country. As far as 2022 is concerned, I think the real thing is going to be, where is China going? Where is Russia going? What is the geopolitical landscape going to be? How will the EU deal with Russia? How will the EU deal with China, and how will the United States deal with all of us? Those are going to be, there'll be big geopolitical questions, I think, that'll drive the economies through 2022. But there will be a lot of uncertainty.
Arise business analyst Michael Wilson, thank you very much. Bosun, it is over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Femi. So the global economy has come through the year better than even top economists expected. Markets are ending the year on a high, and despite the emergence of a new variant of the COVID virus. But that's come at a price, and there's a resurgence of inflation to levels not seen in decades. Christina Millman has more.
Inflation, a rapid increase in prices, a dramatic fall in the purchasing power of money. Inflation hasn't dogged the Western world since the 1970s. That's when the Middle East oil embargo lit a fire under oil prices, which in turn sent economies into a tailspin. Fast forward to 2021, oil prices surged by almost 70% over the course of the year, albeit from very low levels touched during the lockdowns of 2020. Fast recovering global economies have sucked up unforeseen volumes of energy, pushing consumer prices to their highest levels in decades. And remarkably, this is a bout of inflation that no one saw coming. Here's Jerome Powell, the chairman of America's Federal Reserve Bank, speaking back in June.
As these transitory supply effects abate, inflation is expected to drop back toward our longer-run goal.
And here he is again, just 5 months later, sounding a lot less confident.
Generally, the higher prices we're seeing are related to the supply and demand imbalances that can be traced directly back to the pandemic and the reopening of the economy. But it's also the case that price increases have spread much more broadly in the recent few months across the economy, and I think the risk of higher inflation has increased.
It's not just surging energy prices fueling inflation. Previously locked down populations have developed a taste for buying things rather than spending their money on holidays or meals out, leading to traffic jams in ports around the world. The grounding of the massive Ever Given container ship in March blocked the important Suez Canal route, exacerbating that backlog of deliveries. And in much of the Western world, transporting goods onward from ports has added to price pressures. Lorry drivers have been in short supply in both Europe and the U.S. Goods shortages are particularly acute in the U.S., where a divided legislature approved hefty support payments. That created a windfall for many American households and a subsequent splurge on everything from electronics to home furnishings. Congressional Republicans are now scathing about the inflationary effects of those payments.
It's important to note that the American people are mostly fixated on inflation. We have the raging inflation, as bad, some would argue, as back in the late 70s, early 80s. Gas prices are over $3 a gallon in every state in the Union. There's no relief in sight. It's a direct result of flooding the country with money.
It's a political football for elected officials who can do little to affect the price of commodities like oil. And that could bode very poorly for at least one world leader who's due to face voters in just 3 short years.
And that's it from me in Abuja. Thanks for being with us, and all the best for 2022 from the entire Arise team.